Hello, my friends. Happy Monday. So, I recently watched a video from another YouTuber talking about writing strong female characters and how people get this wrong a lot of the time. And I totally agree. It's important to have strong female characters. But what does that mean? I think too often we really go in the wrong direction with this. You see it a lot in Hollywood, and you see it a lot in fiction, in written fiction as well. So I want to talk about my idea of that, of what makes a, a strong female character, and how people misinterpret that a lot of time. First, I want to say, I really don't try to write strong female characters. I try to write good female characters, interesting female characters, just like I try to write good and interesting male characters. I don't try to make anyone just strong and have that be their identifying character trait. Yeah, I have characters who have strengths. I have characters who have weaknesses. They all have strengths and weaknesses. That is the point. I think if you're just thinking one-dimensionally on this and going, I need to make female characters who are strong, you're not going to make a good character. And you're going to end up selling out your story for the sake of achieving this goal that you're being told that you are supposed to achieve, but it's not even really being defined all that well. So I think too many strong female characters are really just toxic male characters who have been made female. They're arrogant, they're emotionless, they're invulnerable, they're aggressive. And it is true that society tends to be more accepting, more tolerant of male characters who are like that than female characters who are like that. But the thing is, if I'm going to put a character like that in one of my books, that character, male or female, is going to be a villain, or is going to be a dynamic character who's going to need to grow significantly over the course of the story. I can't talk about this without talking about feminism. I'll make it clear that I am not an anti-feminist. I am very much in line with many feminist goals and values. But feminism incorporates a lot of stuff. It's kind of like talking about Christianity. Like, within that, you have a lot of different people saying different things that often contradict each other. And that's the same thing with feminism. And I think that I disagree with some aspects of feminism that we see today. And one of those is this tendency to think that we empower and liberate women by helping them to obtain the vices that have long been characteristic of some men. We help women to become the same as negative male stereotypes, and we act as if that's achieving something. It's not. It's not. You don't. The goal should not be to have women adopt the vices of men. That's not a good thing. Arrogance and overbearance and aggressiveness, those are things that actually tend to be tied to an underlying insecurity, a weakness. And so, like, even if I do have a character like that, I'm going to make it evident in the story that that weakness exists. But too often, we want to have these characters who have all those strengths without the weakness, and pretend that the underlying insecurity isn't there. I almost started to say we shouldn't just take women characters and have them be just female versions of Rambo. But the thing is, I like Rambo. Not that I like hyper masculine, one-dimensional, hyper aggressive male characters, but Rambo is actually a complex and deep character. He has, if you're honest about Rambo, you'll see he has weaknesses. He has deep insecurities, and he is not okay as a character. He is a man who is dealing with very real problems, and his strength is also a weakness. And I think that actually is communicated in the movies, especially the first movie. The later ones not as much, but especially the first movie. And so I think that whether a male or a female, if you have someone who is like that, um, who is very strong in that way, you need to make it clear that there's another side to that. And actually, to be fair to Rambo, he's not really an arrogant person. I don't want to talk too much about Rambo, but there are definitely other male characters that fit that negative stereotype a lot better than Rambo. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about my female characters in my book, my main female characters, and how they are strong, and what that means to me. Like, for example, I have Errol Vanguard, and she is the one who comes to Bondas in the beginning, asking him to help her find her friend who has gone missing. And Errol, I designed her as a person who is almost perfect in ways, but still lacking in other ways. She's very feminine, very empathetic, very sympathetic, and she's very passive. She's very much the kind of woman that traditionally women are told that they should be. And she is that in the best possible way. But as you get to know her, you see that she's not one-dimensional. She has faced very real trauma. She has not been coddled her whole life. And she is kind not because she's been coddled and she's never faced anything difficult, but because in facing her trauma, that has caused her to develop kindness and empathy toward other people. And in that you see her strength, her very real empathy for others. It's not a superficial sweetness. It is a very real, deep, strong empathy and willingness to sacrifice for others, to help others. And she does develop, as the story goes. She is, not just in the first book, Wild River, but as the series progresses, she's going to discover inner strengths that she has that show things that she's never really considered about herself. And you do see somewhat in Wild River, her learning to be assertive without abandoning all the good things about herself, without abandoning that empathy, that sympathy, that feminine value. She learns to become assertive, and to fight for the things that she wants and that she believes in. Then you have Valesia. Valesia is pretty different from Errol in that Valesia is very self-assured. She's very outspoken and outgoing. She's also very nice, though, like Errol. She's very sympathetic toward others. With her, it's that is communicated largely through her art. And she's very artistic. She's very much an artist, and she's a very religious person. I think that her weakness, though, is that she tends to look at the big picture all the time. She's always fighting for these lofty ideals, for these high principles, to the point where she kind of starts to ignore the people around her. But as the story progresses, she learns to do that. Even though she was always kind, she had this tendency of being kind of oblivious to the people close by her, because she was so focused on ideals, on high principles. But as the story progresses, she learns to kind of come back down to earth and to be with the people who are there with her, and to fight for them. Then you have Pelorna. Pelorna is an interesting character, and I've made a video about her already. She is a rich heiress, and she is actually a skilled fighter because in her university studies and her school studies, she has learned fencing. But the thing is, that has always just been something that she did kind of for exercise, for discipline. She hasn't ever really fought anyone, and she's never been accustomed to violence. And in this story, all of a sudden she's put into this situation where there's a lot of violence, and she has to deal with that. And she has to fight herself, and she's never had to do that before. Violence has always been something very distant from her, and you see, even though she is a strong-willed person, you see how violence is not something that comes second nature to her. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to go and kick some butt no, she has trouble handling this. But at the same time, she is a self-assured person. She is someone who has goals. She is fighting for her family, trying to find out what happened to them, where they went, and who took them. And so she's having to come to grips with reality, where she's been taught to be assertive. She's taught to wield authority, but she's also been kind of coddled her whole life, and she's never had to face any real opposition, certainly not violence. And now that she's faced with these things, she has to realize that she is weak in some ways, and she has to deal with that. Then we also have Lavenda, who I also made a video about before. But Lavenda is different from the others in that she does have some of those stereotypically male toxic traits to some extent. She is a fighter. She has grown up in a house where they are rich, but she has grown up in an abusive environment, one in which people don't really care about other people. It's all about what you can get. And she's been taught that from a young age. And she's had to fight for herself in this environment. But in a way, she has also been coddled in some ways, but in a lot of ways not. She has been abused, and she's had to deal with that. But she is a fighter, and she is someone who has certain superhuman characteristics. And so early on in the story, we start to see her getting into fights, dealing with violence, and she handles it a lot better than the other female characters, because it's not something that's really foreign to her. But she is not a one-dimensional character who just goes and kicks butt and kind of just takes the role of the classic male character who just goes and kicks butt all the time. No, she has very real weaknesses. She is in doubt of herself. She has this inner turmoil because she realizes that her house is evil. Her family does evil things. But she also seeks power because she has been taught that is the only way that she can defend herself from aggressors, is by obtaining power. So she seeks power. But she also is starting to grasp certain idealistic principles, and she's being affected by that. And that is changing her. And so I see a principle in all of these characters that I think is important in writing fiction, is that a strong character is not a character without weaknesses. A strong character is a character who faces his or her weaknesses. And a strong character can be either male or female in that sense. And if you make them strong in that sense, that is a good and interesting character. So again, these are stories, these are characters from Wild River, which I'm still in the process of finishing up. I'm going to be releasing the novel in January. The prequel novella, which is called Den of the Wolfman, that will be released very soon. Stay tuned. I will tell you when that happens. Subscribe below to keep getting updates, and I will see you on the next video.